Well, good morning, you guys. It's a little after 9. Let's chit-chat for a little bit because I think there's a couple more guys we're going to log in. And I don't know if any of you had a chance to watch the Ernie Conover video that I posted a link to last night.
I did watch that. That's quite the video.
Yeah, and since I tried that, it works like a charm, I'll tell you, and I'll show you this morning. I have to get my persuader out for knocking it into the chuck.
John, my first question on that would be, are you using, is that end grain or side grain to make that jam chuck?
That was exactly one of my questions. And I decided to sacrifice a lovely block that could have made a really nice jar, and I made 3 jam chuck blocks. My other question is, does the opening be a cylinder or does it be circular, half a circle? So I made them both. But the one that's the cylinder seems to work better, which is how Ernie did it as well.
But you are going into the end grain there?
Yeah, it's into the end grain.
Okay.
I think that's a little more stable. And anyway, that's the size, that's the block that I had, you know.
Right.
I didn't want to sacrifice a flat plank for one thing. You know, 3-inch plank face grain. It didn't seem, I have a lot of this end grain blocks that I cut. We harvested a lot of cherry last summer between a bunch of us. Barry had some, and Doug led me to some, and you know, we went out to Hollister's place for some more. So I got quite a bit of cherry around here in different forms. Well, you guys might be who we're going to get. So, how many of you are any good at turning balls? Who thinks they know how to do it? Okay.
How many of us are into it, or how many have accomplished it?
Say it again, Barry.
Did you say how many of us are into it, or how many of us have accomplished it?
Well, how many are any good at it is what I'd really like to know.
Oh, I made one for the challenge, but that's it.
I'll show you where I got with it. These are balls that I made out of, well, let me see. I started from a whole lot of this. These are Cocobolo blocks from that material we bought at the auction a couple of years ago, Barry, that big stash.
Yeah.
So then I made balls between centers. Following what Angelo taught me, I made 2 templates. There's an innie, and then I'm aiming at 2-inch balls. So that's a 2-inch template. And then
what is that material?
This is watercolor paper. It's like stiff paper with a decal sort of surface to it. Angelo uses a plastic that's really nice. I just couldn't find any of it. He gave me a sample, but I didn't have enough. So this is the closest I could find, but it's not real durable. The edge gets chewed as you use it. So if I was doing a lot of this, I would go to find a correct plastic that I could cut with a knife and scissors. But I find these 2 gauges to be essential. This one for making the ball between centers. And you don't have to get it very close, but you want to get in the neighborhood. So, and I still got the stubs on the end. And then this one for making the jam chuck, or the socket in the case if you're making ball and socket. But I made a jam chuck with this one like this, and it fits just exactly halfway in there. Can you guys see me? Shall I spotlight myself?
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. If you spotlight yourself, it'll be a little bigger image.
Okay, I'll spot me for everybody. There I am. How's that?
Thank you.
Yeah. So this template, which is just drawn with a compass and then cut out with I think I have a compass that has a little knife blade in it. I probably cut the curve with that. And then it fits in here to the diameter marking pretty much exactly. And then in the other chuck, and for that I'm going to go, let me see, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to, yeah, there's the overhead. So to make the opening, I'm doing the same thing. I'm using the same 2-inch gauge to make a 2-inch hole in the chuck. And that seemed to work pretty good. And this is, now you're getting up to how far I got with it last night. I made 2 cylinders that I could hammer in there. Oh, this one has a tenon. So they would either one go in there. But I also have these balls that were partly turned from a couple of years ago that I never got back to. But we might have well have turned them yesterday. So here's one here. It's a ball. It's not a very good ball. It's you know, It's longer at the poles than it needs to be, and like that. It's not real good. However, I think I can hammer this. I can see on this where the equator was, and I can get it in there so it looks pretty square to me. So then I can take a smaller persuader. That's not quite true. It's high over there. That's pretty good. Now, my question is, and your entertainment this morning is going to be, can I turn this without tearing it out of the chuck?
Only one way to find out.
Do it? Huh?
Only one way to find out.
Are you seeing the overhead view?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's my refurb Canon Vixia 800, which I bought the stripped down version that doesn't have Wi-Fi or any other features. And it's on my overhead drawer slide apparatus. So I can move it. I'm not going to do it right now, but I can move it back and forth. I got about a foot of sideways right-left motion. Yeah, and I got it aimed at the action here. So let's find out what happens if I try and turn this little nub off the end of it for starters. I'm going about 1100, 1150. I'm being as gentle as I can because I don't want to tear it out of here yet. I probably have destroyed the spear right there. Okay, that looks pretty close to hemispherical to me. According to the template, it's not, but it kind of, you know, it's getting in the neighborhood. And that's one of the things that I also figured out about spheres, frankly. You can get them very close and sand them, and nobody will know the difference, whether they're actually close or not. Let me get that out of there. No, I think before I take it out of there, I better make sure I have a drawn diameter on it. So I'll use this pencil here. Okay. Oh, I got to get
John,
it off. So
John, do you have your chuck drilled through so you could ram a rod down through your arbor?
I don't, but I would certainly do that if but I've done that in the past. I used to make chucks like this to turn plates, and I always turned a hole in the middle so I could get the plate out with a dowel. This I'm going to try and keep on doing it this way because I think that this is the authentic, real world, original old woodturner method. See, that didn't work. That's pretty good.
John, did you ever try just using your tailstock to press it in?
Yeah, I could try that, but I think I'm going to do what Ernie did. Give it another hit. And now I got a little wee-wah.
Use the tailstock. You could then center on the.
I can center it on the old dimple from the turning. You've got a point there. Let me see where's the tailstock center. Here's one. This is almost a rosewoods. I don't really care about beating on it. Yeah, that's pretty good. Same thing as before. I'm going to try and turn that dimple off without knocking it out of the chuck. Okay, it's getting near to round, but it isn't real round. And I can see the deviation in it here that, but it, I'm going to take a little scraper to it and see what happens. Too much bald head. That's another thing you got to learn if you're doing this. You got to get your head out of the way. Okay, now I think the strategy next is to knock it out of there and rotate it 90 degrees. But what I've actually done is knock the chuck out of the lathe. So I think that Barry's strategy was correct, to have a hole bored in the bottom of it.
In Ernie's video last evening, he did at least one time he stuck a rod through the back and knocked it out.
Yeah, I can see that that's going to might have to happen here. Shall I go to the drill press and bore a hole?
Sure.
Whatever works for you.
Well, I think I'm going to give it another whack first. I'm going to do it on the lathe bed this time. Got it. Now we'll see if we can get the chuck back in the same place. I did make index marks. There's the number 1 jaw. And I think I'll settle it right back into the same grooves.
Hey, John, I was wondering when you insert the ball into the chuck in the first place, when it still has its stems on the end, why don't you center it up by using your tailstock?
I just did try that and it worked pretty good. So that's a good move. So that's one good learning from here. You see, Ernie hammers a cylinder into this and makes the ball entirely in the jam chuck. Mm-hmm. Seems to me I'm better off to make the ball with stubs between centers to rough the ball out. And I get to about the same place. Now I've rotated it 90 degrees. I can see my equator line is on the axis of the lathe. And I'm going to see if I can tap it in there. It didn't stay true to the 90 degrees. I'm not sure that matters. I guess we're going to find that out too.
Can't see the active time, but we can hear the intermittent cut.
You guys good with the overhead view? Do you want to see the other camera just for fun?
I'm good with
I
this.
like the overhead.
Okay, well, there's the other camera. That's what that would look like.
Okay.
That's so we'll give that a minute and then I'll go back to the overhead. I'm just trying to learn how to do this too. Yeah, my hands are in the way for this one, so you don't see anything. Okay. So we'll go back to the overhead. Yeah.
And I think Ernie talked about watching for the ghost.
Yeah, that's why I'm experimenting with this light. I can see it.
Okay, I cannot.
Huh? And
I don't see it, but if you can, yeah.
I can feel it. The ball is round to there, and then it goes over. My finger's bouncing over here, and it gets back to round at the equator.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and just use this little wee scraper here. It's a little double ender. Negative rake, Boxmaster, and just see what happens. I don't think there's a grain direction to worry about. It still feels kind of lumpy to me, but it's better than it was. Pretty soon in here, I'm just going to go to 80 grit sandpaper, to tell you the truth, but I'm going to turn it around another time and have another play at it.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
this is Gerald.
Hello?
I have another comment here. Watched a demonstration at our club, and the gentleman took a hole saw, took the center drill bit out of it, and ground the teeth off of it. And because it's a good, heavy, hard steel, and then that put a burr on it, and then he held that onto the sphere and was able to true the ball up pretty well.
Yeah, that goes back to Euclid. That's an old trick. The geometry theory was that a ring will lie perfectly on the surface of a sphere.
Yes.
But a ring won't lie perfectly on the surface of something that's not a sphere. So you can test
Correct.
for spherical nature with a ring, even your wedding ring, by moving it around on the sphere. If it lies flat everywhere, it's actually spherical. So what that does is use that theorem to make a cutting tool and scrape the thing. And I've been planning to do that. I just haven't got around to it. It does strike me on a large sphere, it could be kind of dangerous. You could grab that thing out of your hand and throw it pretty far. So, but I am going to try it. I just haven't tried it yet. I think that's a really good thing to try. Has anybody on the screen tried that?
I have not.
Yeah.
I watched a guy do it on YouTube in a little bit different form. He had the hole saw mounted in his chuck, and he had the ball with like a lollipop stem on it, and he just fed it as a blunt end. It was still like a cut-off dowel with the square shoulder, and he fed it into the hole saw, and then by rotating, like in an orbit, the handle of the lollipop, it turned half of the ball into a sphere. He reversed it and turned the other half into a sphere.
I think that's
but it was accurate.
I think that's actually the way to go about it. I'm going to knock this out of here and reverse it again, except I do see I have a pretty rough spot here I'm going to try and tackle first. Okay, I'm going to knock it out of here and turn it again. Yep, same thing. To knock it out of here, I have to take the chuck off the lathe. I think Barry's idea of a knockout hole is a very good one. That'll require drilling it sometime when it's not got a ball in it. Because what if I drill it now from the back, I'm going to drill a hole in the ball. Okay, there's the ball out again. So you guys can rightfully criticize that as a pretty crude method.
John, one of the woodturners I see on YouTube, his name is Alan Stratton.
Yeah, I know.
He turns the balls between two cup centers, one in the tailstock and one in the headstock.
Well, I did that too. And then I went back to redo that method the other day, and I found that I kept making the ball smaller and smaller and smaller. This one here was the one I tried doing. That I tried to do this one that way. And every time I rotated it, I would turn down to the cup center and I'd wind up with a cap, like a little beanie on top of the ball. So I'd rotate the ball and try and get that off, and I'd wind up with another cap someplace else. There's evidence of one there. There's one here still. So, so I found that method not as accurate as I want it to be. And the thing that Ernie did that impressed me a lot, and I'll show you what it was real quick before I go on with this problem. He had the cylinder in here, and he trued up the cylinder, and then he took the diameter with a compass, and he marked, or the radius with a compass, and he marked that on the blank, giving him a true equator to work from. And that struck me as a pretty accurate method. I just haven't tried it yet. It's the next thing I'm going to try. If you guys have the patience, we might do that next. I'm going to give one more shot to getting this little puppy to be an actual round ball. You see, the problem with my method so far, I got a flat here. And I think getting rid of that flat makes the whole ball about a 1/16 too small for the chuck, which is, I think, one of the issues with this method. I mean, you got to not have that in your rough turning in the first place. But you got to turn it enough round so you can't get an egg shape in here too well. So those are the kinds of issues that I'm running into with this method, much as I like it and much as it makes logical sense to me. So I'm going to try and tuck this in here one more time with the most recent equator on the lathe axis. Okay, it's in there now. At least in there well enough to turn a little bit. And I can feel it quite on around here and very round over here. So I'm going to work over here. Okay, that is now pretty round, believe it or not. Now I could find the template, I'd prove it. Here it is. That's a pretty good 2-inch circle all the way around. So what I would do at this point is sand it to 80 grit. And I think that no one will ever know it isn't truly round. So here's a piece of 80 grit. Reverse the direction. When I watched the Weissflog father and son do this at our own symposium a couple of years ago, they were able to put the ball in and out of the socket by hand pressure. And they were thumping, but that's what they did. This is the same thing, though. If I hit it with a hammer, I knock it out of the chuck. So I'm going to, next time I do this, I'm going to do as Barry says and drill that hole.
How badly do you bang up your ball hitting it with a hammer?
I know it. That's the problem with that's why Ernie uses a wooden mallet, but I'm using rosewood here just for the sake of the demo. It's hard as hell, harder than my hammer.
Okay. So
this is not a bad ball, and I could sand this into submission. So I'm going to abandon this one now. And I'm going to drill a hole in this chuck. And then I'm going to put a cylinder in it and try the Ernie method. If you guys are still with me, you still with it?
Here. So far, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Tell me when you're bored and we'll talk about something else.
John, have you ever tried, thinking back to your jig you made for the stems on your chalices, have you tried putting like 4 saw slits in your jam chuck so that basically the bending of the chuck wood is what would allow the ball to enter, and you could even put a hose clamp on it?
I would consider that, yeah. I don't like hose clamps, though. They're pretty dangerous. But I definitely think that could be a pretty good idea.
What would you use instead?
In turning, you know, once you decide you're going to do a bunch of it, you figure it out, and you figure it out, and you get a little better at it, and you finally get it so it works. Let me see if I can find a drill bit here. All I have to do is have a hole big enough for the knockout bar. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Okay, that's through. One thing I learned many years ago is never leave anything sharp in there. I'm sure you know why. Scam, you hit your elbow into it, and boy, does that hurt.
John, are you using a lavalier mic?
I'm sorry?
Are you using a lavalier mic?
No, I'm using a Tonor mic that's attached. It's sort of in between the laptop over to my left and where I'm standing now. Is the mic okay, but for the most part?
It's worked great, and very little noise from the lathe, and that's why I was asking.
It's a straight-on USB microphone that cost, I don't know, it wasn't $20, but it wasn't a whole lot. Okay, I'm going to try and tap this cylinder in here now. I can't use the tailstock to center it because I left a stub when I parted it off.
On your jam chuck, John, on the inside diameter, is that tapered or is that straight?
I was trying to make it straight, but I think it's got a little wee taper.
Okay.
Now, that's running pretty true. So I think Ernie's method was first to square that end off. And then to, with certainty, get yourself a center mark right there.
John, I think the other thing he did too was he put a straight edge across that to make sure that it was straight.
I think he probably did, which I did not do.
Does it matter? What you really want is the center point.
Yeah, and I got a little wee dimple in the center. I don't think it matters. I think it would be a good practice, but I don't think it's critical. So I'm going to take a radius here, and with that, I'm going to mark the diameter. That surprises me where that diameter is. My eye says it should be closer to the chuck, but my compass says, well, it should be the far side of the pencil line, I think. These damn compasses are not accurate. We had better drafting tools in the days of pen and ink. Yeah, that's more like it. That 1/16 of an inch would be fatal. Okay, I think the next step is to turn that as ball-shaped as I can by eye. Is that right?
That's the way I saw it.
Now, would you have the tool rest parallel or at an angle? I'm going to have it at an angle. A little bit below center so I can get in here with the gouge. Up to about 1,200, 1,300.
Oh.
Now that's the old method of doing this, is to turn that at 45 so that you basically are making an octagon. And this would be, and that is pretty close to 45. But this facet should be twice the width of this half facet and the same width as this. So I'm going to turn a little more before I'm near the sphere. Now, I think that's close enough.
Appears to be.
I mean, it's not. I'm going to turn a little more off it. Not much, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably good enough for this move, so we'll see what happens. Nope. I got to quit trying to hit that chuck, because every time I do, I feel it lose its moorings. How do you guys like my robust Scout lathe? I like it.
Very nice.
Huh. You know what, Barry?
What?
Knockout bar isn't long enough.
Do you have a wooden dowel?
I probably could go find one, but it might take me a while.
A piece of drill rod.
I think the answer here is to take it out of the chuck and see how this works. Okay, so that's what we got. Fortunately, I did carefully mark where it indexed here. There's the number 1 jaw. There's the numeral 1. I can get the jaws right back in their original groove. And the other good thing about a jam chuck like this, as Ernie points out, is, okay, so it doesn't run true anymore. Turn it again. I mean, I could get, I'm in that far. I could part this right off and make another one. What do you think?
Pretty good from here.
Pretty good.
Looks good.
John, was your blank exactly the 2-inch diameter? The length of exactly 2 inches?
It was 2-inch diameter at the point where I measured with the caliper, but then I made the sides straight by eye, so I can see here that it's not. It's kind of barrel shaped.
But how about the length?
Length was 2 inches and a bit, which I've already, I think, parted off. Oh, I ought to see if this is even 2 inches. Here's the can. You know, this, yeah, I've just exactly got enough room here to make this. I think I made that cylinder 2 inches and a tiny smidge.
Yeah. Ernie used a longer piece and then parted it to it.
Okay, that's as close as the other end was. You could probably sand a ball out of that now. Let me see if I have another way of getting it out of the chuck that I tried the other day. It'll make a scar, but not that bad a scar. You take your skew chisel, and you kind of set it in there, and you give it a pry. And out she comes. So now the move is to set this back in the chuck with the diameter running parallel to the lathe ways, like that. I think it needs to go in a little further. So we'll use a little more persuasion here. Okay, now I can see pretty well the ghost of where the ball is and isn't. And I think now I'm going to be better off to scrape. Anybody still awake out there?
Yep.
Looking good.
Hey, John, that scraper is basically a negative rake on both sides, right?
Yes, it's the key to it is that the angle between the bottom facet, and the top has got to be less than 90 degrees. It needs to be about 85 degrees. And this is how it came from the Boxmaster people, which are now part of D-Way. And I like it a lot. It's a really nice little scraper. I sharpen from the bottom. I sharpen that, and I get a burr, a little wee burr up here. And it's a little low on burr right now, so I probably will go and sharpen it in a minute. You can see on the ball, there's still some of that line, so there could be a little bit more removed. Same here. So we're not quite down to a round ball yet, and all of the non-round is all over here. I'm within sanding range here, but I'm going to scrape it a little more. I'm going to sharpen this first. Excuse me while I step over to the grinder. Low. These things want to cut right on center. I think that's almost within sanding range. I'm going to hit it just one more time. Yeah, I can sand that now. If I didn't have you all on here, I'd turn on the dust machine too, because I don't like breathing dust. Okay, there's a half ball. Now I'll have to take it out of here again. I'm going to use the skew chisel method again. And now it has to go in. It ought to go in like that.
Was that the original axis?
No, I'm 90 degrees to the original axis, but I'm at the other half of what I just did, and I have a little bit of a waste here that I got to get rid of. This is the original axis. There's in fact the center point, which I'm never going to get rid of on this one, and that's where the other end had a little bit of a tear out. So this is close on here. I'm going to give it another tap to make sure it's in there. And I'm watching where the equator lines are, so I'm trying to get them to be parallel to the face of the chuck so that it's in there square. And so I tap one way or I tap the other. Highly scientific. So that's what, 4 positionings in the chuck, and I still got a groove here where I bobbled it, so we got a little bit of a flat here. So I'm going to take off a little bit more. That's probably as good as I'm going to get it, and I'm going to go back and sand this end of it. Once again, the skew chisel to the rescue. Wee bit of hand sand with the skew, couple of spots here. I'm never going to get rid of that divot. That's where the skew was. I could usefully put this back in the chuck another time and sand it in 2 more orientations, but really there's just a little wee tiny ridge here at the most recent equator. I think you can see what you could do. I mean, if I wasn't being watched and I took a little more care and a little more fussing around, I think this method would get a pretty good sphere. This is not a bad sphere here. There's a wee divot there that I was working on and I would easily quickly get rid of. In here like this twice would get rid of that for sure. Because you can put it in at any angle now that it's almost round. So you don't have to worry about your diameters anymore. You got something you want to sand off there, right there. Just tap it in like that. Can't get it out by hand. That won't get it either. So I'm back to the skew chisel. I'll make a longer knockout route if I ever do this again, which I will. So that got rid of that, and now it can go back. It doesn't have to, really. That's a pretty good ball.
That's pretty impressive.
So that's a good method. I like that method a lot.
Yeah.
And I would do that again. Now I'm going to go to gallery view. Now I can see everybody. Okay, comments, questions, answers?
Yeah, so I liked Barry's idea of putting the slots in so you can have an expanding chuck.
Well, then I'm going to have a hose clamp right near my knuckles too. I don't like that
That's what I was going to ask them. Does anybody have an alternative to the hose clamp?
Yeah, you could cut off a small portion of PVC pipe, like say a 2-inch or a 2.5-inch or 3-inch diameter PVC pipe, or a PVC pipe fitting, and if you in your chuck, instead of making it a cylinder, you make it a slightly tapered, like a conical frustrum, so that when you tap the PVC pipe onto it, it is compressing the jaws, you know, as you tap it on to where it
Don't you have the same
ball.
problem of
You'd compress the jaws to cylindrical, in other words. Because I turned this opening as close to cylindrical as I could by eye.
Yeah,
yes, you can do that.
it would not be, the opening would not be, you know, when you say the cylindrical, you mean
Straight, not
as if it were drilled.
Yeah, I didn't drill it, but I turned it as if it were drilled. Well, the reason I didn't drill it is I ground the center point off my 2-inch drill to see if I could make a flat bottom hole with it. So I don't have a good functioning 2-inch drill right now.
I have a piece of 3-inch pipe on my workbench down there. I'm going to go down there right now. Been thinking about it and make a chuck for turning a ball. But I'm wondering whether the plastic is going to be too slippery to grip the ball like that block of wood did. I may have to put a wooden jaw inside, but I'm going to split it 4 ways.
I think this wood method is pretty good. I'm not inclined to split it.
Yeah.
After fussing, this was the first time really I'd done this whole ball in this method with you guys watching. I think if I do it again a couple of times, I can get it work pretty good. And I would not want to split it. I want the tightness. And I would not make the chuck out of a real hard wood either. Cherry is about right. Pine would be good. You want a little bit of give in there.
Yeah. Yeah, they say mostly when you're doing jam chucks, use a softwood.
Yeah.
I don't usually, because I don't have any, but
cherry's the softest wood I have. Cherry, and it's resilient enough. It seemed to work pretty good. Yeah. So I would do that again. And I think it was no problem making excavating the cavity. You know, it took about 2 seconds.
I'm gonna try that pipe, see if it's too slippery, then I'll have to put a wooden insert in it.
Yeah.
What about making the hole a slight interference fit?
That's what we got here, slight interference fit.
Well, but then slotting it so that, you know.
You should try it. I'm not gonna. I like this setup right here. I'm not going to go for. I'm not looking to improve it with slots, but I do see how that could work. That could give you some degree of adjustability. But I think I'm going to get adjustability by how big I make the block and how big I turn the hole. And now that I realize I'm just going to have to accept that I throw away more wood than I use in the form of the jam chuck, I'm going to have to be okay with it. I've never been much on jam.
I was surprised, John, when you did it. I was surprised how snug it held, even after you had it turned down to a round. The more you took off, I would have thought it might have gotten a little loose in your chuck, but it seemed to snug in there pretty good.
Yeah, but it is a looser fit now than it was at the beginning, which tells me that I was working with a tight jam fit, and I've removed a little bit of wood. I think if I went any further in turning the ball, it would roll right out of there. I mean, I've got some balls that this chuck won't work for. They're too small already.
Yeah.
Yeah, John?
Yeah.
You explained that you don't want to use a slotted chuck, but just because it was discussed earlier on, I have a photo here of see whether you can see that.
I'm going to spotlight you. Hold on a sec.
So that's a traditional wooden jam chuck that uses a wooden ring that is pushed over the chuck.
Very nice.
It's a photocopy, but the quality isn't very good. And here's a drawing on the other side. Maybe that's better. That gives you the idea.
That's very good. If you could take a picture of that and send it to me, I'll circulate it to the group.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's
very nice.
Yeah, it's from an old German book that was written in the 1940s. So
that's where you find the gems sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, you had some trouble getting the sphere out of the chuck. Would it make sense to drill a hole into the chuck right behind the ball so that you somehow can lever it out from the top, not from through the
yeah, because my ramrod is too short through the end. So you're right. I would do that next time. I would do that a little different and figure out a way to get that ball.
So if the ramrod would probably be the best solution.
Longer this direction then, and then kind of lever it out. Maybe that works as well.
That would work pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, John, let me, no pun intended, but I think you could use a longer ramrod.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, there was pun intended.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. That would always be useful.
Yes. Yeah, it worked nicely. Yeah.
Good demo, John. I'm going to head down the shop.
Okay.
I'm leaving as well. Thank you, John.
Okay. I'm going to check out now, too. Okay, I should have done this during the Zoom meeting. I did go and get a longer rod so I could knock the ball out of the chuck from the tailstock side. That works pretty good. Thank you very much for Barry and others who pointed that out to me. Now, I wanted to show you this. I meant to bring it down. This is a little sculpture that Ken Leger showed us at one of our Lancaster symposiums a few years ago. It's 4 2-inch balls running in a circular track. When you can get the dimensions from the AAW Fundamentals publication, because I published this in a longer article about spheres, about 2 years ago. Anyway, I just love the action. Ken said some guy in Ohio had showed it to him, and Ken showed it to me, and you know, it's a very nice thing. And I just love that Woodturners work like that. These balls were 2 inches, and they would just go into this jam chuck for sanding. So there you go. Thank you.